Have you heard the latest on Kouri Richins? She's the Utah woman currently facing charges for allegedly causing her husband's death by giving him a Moscow mule laced with a lethal dose of fent, 5 times the fatal amount. Kouri's husband, Eric, tragically passed away just 1 day before she finalized the purchase of a $2 million, 22,000 square foot home, a property that Eric allegedly refused to contribute toward financially. Then, almost a year to the day following her husband's untimely demise, she went on a PR campaign to promote a children's book she authored. The book was aimed at helping her own children cope with the profound loss of their father, a loss she is accused of causing. Kouri has once again taken up her pen, and her written communications have thrust her back into the spotlight, this time for crafting jailhouse-coded letters. On September 14th, officers at Summit County Jail conducted a thorough search of Kouri's cell, during which they discovered a 6-page letter cleverly concealed within the pages of a book. Prosecutors have asserted that this letter is filled with attempts at witness tampering, alleging that Kouri endeavors to guide her witnesses into offering fabricated testimony. In the letter, Kouri appears to exert control over the narrative, particularly when instructing her mother with the cryptic directive, "Walk the dog, but take vague notes so you remember." Since the discovery of the letter, some suspicious signs suggesting Kouri's mom has indeed walked the dog have come to light. We're going to get into it, but first be sure to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on updates to this story, trending topics, and so much more. Now let's get into it. After a relatively quiet period in this case, recent weeks have seen a significant surge in news and activity. The courtroom has come alive with intense legal maneuvering in the Kouri Richins case. Lawyers have been swiftly filing motions, and the focal point of these legal actions is Kouri's most recent writing project. If you're not yet familiar with this case, you can catch up on the details here in Deadly Moscow Mule. So here's what happened. On September 13th, Kouri made a phone call to her mother, Lisa Darden. According to prosecutors, Kouri mentioned 2 letters to her mom during that call. Court records further indicate that Kouri was overheard reading a portion of a letter penned by another inmate. This development raised eyebrows because inmate-to-inmate correspondence is strictly prohibited by jail rules. So, on the following day, September 14th, court records indicate that Kouri engaged in a video call with her mom. During this call, Kouri held up a multi-page letter for her mother to either photograph or read to herself. Then later that day, Kouri's cell number 4, that is solely occupied by her, underwent a thorough search conducted by the Summit County Sheriff's Office. During the search, law enforcement discovered a letter titled "Walk the Dog," cleverly concealed within the pages of an LSAT prep book, LSAT for Law School Admission Test. It's worth noting that aspiring lawyers are required to take the LSAT exam before gaining admission to law school. Reports have indicated that Kouri aspires to become a lawyer herself someday. When officers conducted the search of Kouri's cell, they found the Walk the Dog letter. However, the other letters in question were not found during the search. Prosecutors strongly believe that the remaining letters were either flushed down the toilet or destroyed by other means. If the Walk the Dog letter serves as any indication of what Kouri previously conveyed to her mother through the other letters, then her defense is in big trouble. The letter kicks off with striking emphasis, featuring bold letters and exclamation marks. "Walk the dog, but take vague notes so you remember." The significance of walking the dog is underscored once more on page 3 as Kouri signs off with encouraging words to her mother to hang in there, we're almost there, love you to the moon. However, this time she adds a twist, urging her mother to take vague notes of all of this so you remember before you walk the dog. If we take the first line literally, it might seem as if She's asking her mom to take a real dog for a walk. However, within the context of this letter, Kouri's emphasis on walking the dog carries significant importance. It's one of the initial messages she wishes to convey to her mom, and this theme resurfaces on page 3. It's worth noting that page 3 seems to have been the original conclusion to the letter, as on page 4, she transitions into an entirely new topic. However, as the letter progresses from page 4, she revisits and expands upon points covered in the initial 3 pages. Now, on this occasion, she instructs her mother to take notes of all of this, so you remember before you walk the dog. If this indeed pertains to a real dog, it would be easily verifiable, and I anticipate the prosecution will thoroughly investigate this aspect. The remarkable level of concern Kouri expresses about the dog in this letter, marked by its prominent placement at the top and its mention at the end, underscores that walking the dog holds utmost importance. If this is, in fact, referencing a real dog, there should be a trail of evidence in the form of discussions about the dog's name, his behavior, and questions about walking him in numerous jail conversations between Kouri and her mother. Prosecutors should be able to discern her consistent concern for Cooper throughout these conversations. However, if there is no mention of Cooper or any corresponding concern in other exchanges, it strongly suggests that the dog is not an actual canine, but rather coded language for something else. If we look closely at both instances where walk the dog is used and its consistent connection to the task of taking vague notes for remembering, it becomes apparent that the literal act of walking the dog is not in any way related to the secondary task, note-taking. However, Kouri couples these two tasks both times as if one hinges on the other. Take vague notes of all this so you remember before you walk the dog. Kouri is conveying that one task should not precede the other. They are interconnected thoughts. If these tasks are unrelated, her mother could take the notes at her convenience, regardless of when she walks the dog. But Kouri insists that one cannot be accomplished before the other. And through her consistent choice of phrasing, Kouri strongly implies that the act of taking vague notes must arise from the task of walking the dog. It's certainly plausible that walking the dog may symbolize destroying the letter. But if we delve deeper into the analogy of walking the dog, we can glean additional meaning from the coded message. Typically, when you walk the dog, you not only guide it on a path, but you also likely scoop the poop. In essence, this analogy could imply to Kouri's mother that she guide Ronnie and the others on the storyline, similar to guiding the dog, then dispose of any incriminating evidence, like scooping the poop. But before disposing, take vague notes so you remember. In my view, the phrase walk the dog but take vague notes so you remember serves as code for Kouri's mom to guide Ronnie on the storyline, subsequently dispose of the letter, but ensure that vague notes are taken for future recollection. Should this walk the dog letter find its way into evidence in court, there is a high likelihood that the jury will invest time and attention in dissecting and discussing this specific phrase. Within the letter, Kouri makes a request of her brother Ronnie, whom we would naturally anticipate testifying on her behalf in court without any hesitation. We can also discern from the letter that Kouri exhibits a degree of uncertainty regarding Ronnie's willingness to fulfill the request. It's evident in her approach. Kouri approaches the request persuasively, offering assurances to her brother as a means of encouraging his cooperation. In the letter, Kouri conveys to her mother that her attorney aims to establish a connection between Eric's acquisition of drugs and pills from Mexico. To achieve this, she emphasizes the need for some form of linkage. In that statement, she implies that one doesn't quite exist yet. Then Kouri goes on to explain that her legal team's private investigator is actively conducting research into the ranch or cartel location where Eric would typically stay. So she writes, "Here's what I'm thinking." The phrase, "here's what I'm thinking," carries a clear implication that Kouri is preparing to share her thoughts, ideas, plans, or opinions concerning a specific topic or situation. It signifies her intention to convey her perspective and provide insights into her mindset regarding the matter at hand. Essentially, she's about to share her storyline, her narrative. This statement differs from one that simply invokes a past memory. If she intended to prompt Ronnie's recollection of a specific event, her opening statement alternatively might have been something like, "Ask Ronnie if he remembers that time when, yeah, I need him to testify about that." However, her chosen opening statement signals her intent to make a suggestion, one for which she's uncertain whether Ronnie will agree to do on her behalf. This tells us that Kouri is requesting Ronnie to undertake a task that goes beyond his initial commitment to testify on her behalf. Rather, she wants his testimony to align with a specific narrative, one that he will need guidance on, one that doesn't come from his own recollections. Keep in mind that Kouri is asking her mother's assistance to facilitate this request to her brother. So Kouri writes, "Here's what I'm thinking, but you have to talk to Ronnie. He would probably have to testify to this, but it's super short, not a lot to it." Here, it becomes evident that Kouri isn't merely requesting her brother to testify to the truth. She's asking him to testify to something specific, something that likely deviates from the truth. Otherwise, there would be no need for her to delicately approach the request, nor would she feel compelled to include the incentive that it's super short, not a lot to it, as a means to persuade him. If the story comes truly from the vault of Ronnie's memory, there would be no need to discuss details with him. It would be simply a matter of reminding him of the event and then leaving it to her lawyer to tease out the details through her line of questioning. And what precisely could Kouri be referring to when she says it's super short? She can't be talking about his testimony because she has no control over how long he will be on the stand. No, she's talking about something specific, and that something is laid out in the very next paragraph. It's the very detailed narrative she shares in the very next paragraph of the letter. And it reads, "Upon information and belief, just like they say, a year prior to Eric's death, Ronnie was over watching football one Sunday, and Eric and Ronnie were chatting about Eric's Mexico trips. Eric told Ronnie he gets pills and Fent from Mexico from the workers at the ranch. He told Ronnie not to tell me because I would get mad because I always said he just gets high every night and won't help take care of the kids. There are pictures in my phone of Eric passed out on the floor or in the chair. Ronnie should have texts from Eric talking about getting high as well. Eric told Ronnie he keeps them in an allergy pill bottle in his work truck so I wouldn't find them. Ronnie never told me about the conversation. Eric finally told me and asked if Carmen could get him some. Eric never wanted anyone to know he had an issue, especially get caught. He always wanted Kouri to go down for him. When they traveled, Eric would put his drugs in Kouri's bag at the airlines right before they boarded. That way, if they were caught, Kouri got in trouble, not him. And then once they got to wherever they were going, Eric would pull the drugs out of her bag and it would cause a huge fight. She was pissed he would risk her going to jail for his drug use. He just would laugh about it. Eric couldn't ruin his image that he had drug issues, so he would do whatever he had to. Kouri has never done any type of pills She didn't like them. Rarely would she consume THC, only if Eric begged her, because it was a special occasion. Reword this however he needs to make the point. Just include it all. The connection has to be made with Mexico and drugs. Ronnie will have the messages to prove Eric confided in him about getting high. It can be short and to the point, but has to be done. Upon information and belief, LOL. There are a few things about this section of the letter that glaringly indicate that Kouri wasn't merely asking her brother to recall an event, but rather to rehearse the specific story laid out for him. The initial detail that caught my attention was her shift from first person to third person. During the narration of the story, there's a noticeable transition from using first person pronouns, I, me, my, to referring to herself as Kouri. However, once the story concludes, she promptly reverts to using first-person language. This shift is especially evident when examining the sentences immediately preceding and following the narrative. In the very next sentence after concluding the story, she states, "They never found pain pills or Fent in my house because he hid it in an allergy bottle in his work truck." Did you happen to notice that at the very end of the story, Kouri once again attempts to persuade her brother with the assertion that it can be short and to the point, but has to be done? On page 3, she writes, "Tell Ronnie don't overanalyze it. It was a quick 2-minute conversation, LOL." Kouri's use of LOL can be seen as sort of a wink and a nod. If this story originated from Ronnie's personal experiences, there would be no need for him to overanalyze it. It just is. And Ronnie, not Kouri, would possess the knowledge to specify the duration of the conversation he and Eric had. It's clear that she's offering instructions and incentives to help Ronnie become more at ease with the risks associated with testifying falsely in court. But there is another glaring thing to notice here, and that's her use of the phrase, upon information and belief. Kouri draws attention to this section of the letter, the narrative intended for her brother, by framing it with the phrase, upon information and belief. Placing this phrase both at the beginning and the end of the story signifies it's precisely what she wants to be included. The phrase functions much like quotation marks, an opening quotation mark followed by a closing quotation mark. If we examine the sentences immediately preceding and following this phrase, it becomes apparent that they are conversational in the first person and are addressed to her mother. However, everything contained within the phrases, upon information and belief, is meant for Ronnie. It outlines the plan for Ronnie. We all know that this phrase, upon information and belief, is a legal term, and most of us might not immediately grasp its meaning and would likely go look it up. In the same way it piqued our curiosity, I'm certain the recipient of these instructions would also feel inclined to look it up if the phrase raised an eyebrow for them. And if they looked it up, they would have found that this phrase indicates that a statement is being made based on someone's information and belief, rather than on personal knowledge or direct evidence. When someone includes on information and belief in a legal document, they are essentially stating that they have reason to believe a certain fact is true, but they may not have firsthand knowledge or direct evidence to confirm it. It's a way of saying, I'm not sure, but I believe so based on what I know. I don't have direct knowledge or concrete proof of what I'm saying, but based on the information available to me and my belief, I think it's true. Now, these types of statements are considered hearsay and generally would not be admissible in court. When a witness is testifying, they are typically expected to provide firsthand knowledge or direct evidence of the facts they are presenting. Hearsay or statements based solely on information and belief are often not admissible because they lack the required level of reliability and credibility. In this case, they lack the ability to be verified because the person about which the statements are being made cannot be put under oath and cross-examined for verification. So, why would Kouri invest such significant effort into persuading her brother to recount a story that is rooted in hearsay? One would think that these statements about Eric would be quickly objected to when made in open court. Objection, Your Honor, hearsay, because Eric is not available. He cannot corroborate or refute the allegations in the narrative Kouri wants to tell. It seems unfair that they can make allegations about Eric when he can't speak for himself, doesn't it? Well, there are exceptions to the hearsay rule. And Kouri's detailed presentation of this narrative undeniably unveils these exceptions and, in turn, sheds light on her lawyer's defense strategy. The prosecutors are celebrating right now. According to Utah Rules of Evidence 803 and 804, if a person cannot be present or testify at trial or hearing because of death or a then existing infirmity, physical illness, or mental illness, statements citing what the unavailable witness did and said are allowed. So, if Ronnie told this story to the jury on information and belief, he's essentially stating that he has reason to believe that Eric got drugs from Mexico, but he doesn't have firsthand knowledge or direct evidence to confirm it. It's just something Eric said a year prior to his death while I was over watching football one Sunday when we were chatting about his Mexico trips. This story plants seeds of doubt. To be clear, Ronnie wouldn't be testifying to the veracity of the statements Eric made about Mexico. He couldn't. He wasn't there. But instead, he's testifying to his belief that the statements are true based on his knowledge of the person, the circumstances, and what he is claiming Eric told him. Now, let me tell you how the story that Kouri concocted reveals her lawyer's strategy. The statements. Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and Fent from Mexico from the workers at the ranch. He told Ronnie not to tell me because I would get mad because I always said he just gets high every night and won't help take care of the kids. These statements are specifically designed to impeach Eric's reputation as a pious man who took care of his health and who did not abuse drugs. The intent is to give credence to the idea that Eric was someone who was dishonest and who was always high and wasn't a good parent. To impeach Eric with these statements, Kouri's lawyer would need to introduce evidence that would show Eric's prior statements or conduct to challenge his credibility. That's why Kouri immediately follows these statements with, "There are pictures in my phone of Eric passed out on the floor and in the chair. Ronnie should have texts from Eric talking about getting high as well." Clever, right? Now on to these statements. Eric never wanted anyone to know he had an issue, especially get caught. He's always wanted Kouri to go down for him. These statements show that Eric had motive to hide his alleged drug use. It shows that he feared anyone finding out, that it would ruin his reputation. Now these statements. When they traveled, Eric would put his drugs in Kouri's bag at the airlines right before they boarded. That way, if they were caught, Kouri got in trouble, not him. Once they got to wherever they were going, Eric would pull the drugs out of her bag and it would cause a huge fight. These statements give context to Eric's deception and illustrate his intent and the lengths to which he will go to hide his habit. And of course, All the statements about Kouri being a good girl who never had interest in drugs and the statements about Kouri going down for Eric are there for the purpose of corroborating her defense, repairing her reputation, and for showing that she instead is the victim here and that her actions were in support of Eric. It helps to demonstrate that Kouri had a reasonable basis for her decision to contact Carmen on Eric's behalf. The entire purpose of this story is to establish Eric's state of mind before he died. Kouri's defense attorney can argue that the testimony about the conversation with Eric is not being offered for the truth of Eric's statements during the conversation, but rather to impeach Eric's credibility and to shed light on the reasons behind Kouri's actions. It can be particularly relevant if it shows that Eric had a motive to lie or was known to be unreliable. This is absolutely the reason why Kouri's lawyer is looking to make a connection between Mexico and the pills. And it's the reason why Kouri wants to drudge up the alleged text messages and pictures of Eric passed out. The Mexico link, text messages, and the pictures would support the narrative that Eric's death may have been self-inflicted, and they also give credence to Kouri's statements that she purchased the pills from Carmen on Eric's behalf. Their strategy is to show that Eric's death was of his own doing. Kouri's brother said it himself in his Good Morning America interview.
When I got the news that Eric had died, I broke down into tears. He was a good guy. I mean, he lived life to the extreme and, eventually it got him. But it's my sister. I knew Eric. She didn't do this.
The big question is whether the contents of the Walk the Dog letter were indeed conveyed to Kouri's mother and brother. For it to be witness tampering, it must be proven that Kouri shared the letter with them. If no one has seen it, then it's an uphill battle for the prosecution. I think there's evidence showing that Kouri shared the coded letter with her mother, and I submit to you the chain of events. On September 13th, Kouri calls her mom, Lisa Darden. Prosecutors say that during this call, Kouri read aloud a part of a letter that another inmate wrote to her. On September 14th, Kouri makes a call to her mom, this time on video. During the call, Kouri held up a multi-page letter so her mother could read or photograph it. She didn't read it out loud. Later that day, Summit County Jail officers found and confiscated a third letter in her cell entitled Walk the Dog, hidden in a book. September 15th, the very day after Kouri held up the multi-page letter, Lisa Darden, Kouri's mother, spoke exclusively to the Daily Mail after steadfastly refusing media requests for interviews since Kouri's arrest. According to the Daily Mail, Lisa repeated the narrative from the Walk the Dog letter, stating that Kouri's husband would buy drugs abroad, slip them into Kouri's luggage without her knowledge. You tell me, do you think she shared the contents of the letter with her mother? What's even worse, on the following day, September 16th, Kouri makes a call to her mother. In that recorded jail call, Kouri tells her mom that the letter was not intended for her. And she says, and I quote, "When I first got in here, I was telling you how I was writing a book. Those papers were not a letter to you guys. They were part of my freaking book. I was writing this fictional mystery book. I go to Mexico and I'm like trying to find these drugs. I'm writing about Dad, like me and Dad went to Mexico to find these drugs. And you can very much tell that the whole thing is very much a story. Then I get in the Mexican prison. I said, have Sky sneak me in some white strips because my teeth are getting yellow because all we do is drink coffee in the Mexican prison." Kouri told her mother that everything in the letter was fiction. I say we should trust that statement. It's all a lie. Every word, even the narrative, in my opinion. Up until now, we have literally heard nothing from Kouri, which left much to the imagination. There were lots of courtroom expressions to analyze and to speculate about. The discovery of her letter has provided a revealing glimpse into her true character. For the first time, we gain insight into her mindset through her own words. This type of evidence is particularly damning as it reflects the considerable time, thought, and intent invested in composing this extensive 6-page letter. Her thought process and apparent willingness to jeopardize the well-being of everyone in her sphere, including her children, are now laid bare for all to see. Inadvertently, she exposed not only her lawyer's strategy, but also her own clandestine plan developed behind her lawyer's back. All of this has been captured in a tangible form that can be presented to the jury, who will undoubtedly second-guess every witness mentioned in the letter. The individuals mentioned in this letter likely encompass the entire circle of people capable of providing insights into her relationship. As soon as any of the individuals listed in the letter take the stand, you can expect the letter to be employed as a means to impeach their testimony, and the jury will inevitably scrutinize each of these witnesses and the narratives they present. In essence, she has undermined their credibility before they've uttered a single word and simultaneously destroyed her own defense in the process. Would you believe the testimony of anyone listed in this letter? Do you think Kouri's mother's statements to the Daily Mail are proof of witness tampering? Let's continue the conversation down in the comments section below. I'll meet you there.